Welcome to Epic World History. Here, we journey through the triumphs and tragedies that shaped humanity. From the Black Death that claimed millions, silenced cities, and tested faith, to the resilience of survivors who rebuilt a scarred Europe. Every story reveals how despair gave rise to change. Join us as we uncover the turning points that remind us, even in darkness, history lights the path forward. In the mid-14th century, medieval Europe faced its darkest hour. The Black Death history began when the bubonic plague arrived from Asia, carried by rats and fleas aboard trading ships. What followed was devastation on a scale unseen before, reshaping society, faith, and culture for centuries. This was not just a disease, it was a turning point in human history. The Black Death struck first in 1347, when ships docked in Sicily carrying 6 sailors. Within days, entire ports collapsed into chaos. The bubonic plague spread with terrifying speed, its victims suffering fevers, swellings, and death within days. Medieval Europe, unprepared and terrified, could not comprehend the invisible killer that was sweeping across its lands. The plague's symptoms were unmistakable. Large black swellings, called buboes, appeared in the groin and armpits. Victims endured unbearable pain, high fever, vomiting of blood, and delirium. Death often followed within 3 days. To the people of medieval Europe, it seemed like divine punishment, and fear gripped every village, town, and city. From Sicily, the Black Death spread northward into Italy's great cities. Florence, Genoa, and Venice, centers of medieval Europe's trade and culture, became graveyards. Entire neighborhoods fell silent, and corpses filled the streets. The bubonic plague did not discriminate. Merchants, peasants, and nobles all suffered the same fate. The great Renaissance cities were reduced to ghostly ruins of despair. The bubonic plague traveled along trade routes, carried by merchants and caravans across medieval Europe. France, Spain, and England soon faced the same nightmare. Town after town saw its population vanish. In Paris, tens of thousands perished. In London, cemeteries overflowed. Everywhere, the Black Death history unfolded as a relentless force erasing families, communities, and hope. London in 1348 was a bustling medieval city, yet the plague brought it to its knees. Reports spoke of bodies piling in houses, unattended children wandering the streets, and bells tolling endlessly for the dead. The bubonic plague turned the capital of England into a city of mourning, where survival seemed almost impossible. The plague's mortality rate was staggering. In some towns, over half the population perished. Monasteries lost nearly all their monks, and churches stood empty. Medieval Europe seemed abandoned by God. Priests and doctors, powerless to cure the bubonic plague, often died themselves. Fear stripped away order, leaving chaos in its wake. As death spread, so did fear and superstition. Many believed the Black Death history was God's punishment for sins. Some turned to prayer, others to flagellation, whipping themselves in public to beg forgiveness. Yet the plague showed no mercy. The bubonic plague cut across faith and ritual, leaving believers and doubters alike lying in the same mass graves. Blame quickly fell on minorities. In cities across medieval Europe, Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells or spreading the disease. Pogroms erupted, killing thousands of Jews. The bubonic plague not only destroyed bodies, but also tore apart societies, unleashing violence fueled by fear and prejudice. The Black Death disrupted medieval Europe's economy. Fields lay abandoned, harvests rotted, and famine followed plague. With so many laborers dead, survivors demanded higher wages. Lords struggled to control their peasants, and feudal structures began to crack. The bubonic plague reshaped not just lives, but the foundations of Europe's economy. Medieval medicine was powerless. Doctors wore long robes, leather gloves, and strange beaked masks filled with herbs, believing the scent would block disease. They carried staffs to avoid touching patients. Despite their efforts, the bubonic plague ignored these defenses, striking down physician and peasant alike. As cities crumbled, many fled to the countryside. Yet the plague followed, carried by fleas or rats hiding in grain and clothing. Villages that once seemed safe became silent graveyards. No corner of medieval Europe escaped. The bubonic plague reached castles, cottages, and cloisters alike. The death toll was catastrophic. Historians estimate that between 25 and 50 million people died, 1/3 to half of Europe's population. In some towns, entire families vanished. Churches struggled to bury the dead, and mass graves scarred the landscape. The Black Death history marked Europe's darkest demographic collapse. Art and literature reflected the horror. Images of the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, appeared in paintings, showing skeletons leading people of all classes to the grave. Medieval Europe found its imagination consumed by death, turning beauty into grim reminders of mortality. Children were not spared. Accounts told of villages where not a single child survived. Orphans wandered the roads, abandoned in the chaos. The bubonic plague broke the natural cycle of life, snatching the young before they could inherit the world of their parents. The plague struck with waves. Just as Europe thought it had passed, the Black Death returned again and again. Outbreaks recurred for centuries, haunting medieval Europe with renewed terror. Bubonic plague became an unwelcome companion of life, always threatening to return with vengeance. In the face of despair, some sought scapegoats. Others turned to strange cures, drinking potions, wearing charms, or sitting between fires to cleanse the air. None worked. The bubonic plague defied medicine, prayer, and superstition alike, reminding humanity of its helplessness before nature's wrath. The clergy, once pillars of hope, faltered. Priests fled their parishes, monasteries emptied, and faith was shaken. Some survivors questioned God's mercy. Others deepened their devotion. The Black Death history transformed Europe's spiritual life, sowing seeds of doubt and reform that would echo for centuries. Cities created plague ordinances. Quarantines were imposed, ships held offshore, and homes sealed with the sick inside. These early public health measures were desperate attempts to halt the spread. Though often cruel, they marked the beginning of Europe's struggle to understand and control disease. Even amidst despair, some survived. Villages emptied, yet a few families lived on, immune or lucky. These survivors carried stories of loss, but also resilience. Medieval Europe emerged scarred, yet transformed. The bubonic plague had redrawn its population, its economy, and its destiny. By 1351, the first great wave of the Black Death had ended, but its shadow lingered. Across medieval Europe, entire villages remained abandoned, their houses crumbling into the earth. Survivors rebuilt on ruins, living with the memory of plague as a constant presence in their lives. The bubonic plague became part of Europe's very identity. The labor shortage gave peasants new power. Demanding better pay and conditions, they challenged feudal lords. Revolts erupted, shaking medieval Europe's hierarchy. The Black Death history helped sow seeds of social change, breaking chains that had bound peasants for centuries. With so many gone, forests reclaimed farmlands. Wolves and wild animals roamed near towns once bustling with life. Nature took back what had been cleared, reminding survivors that the plague had shifted not just society, but the landscape itself. Art changed profoundly after the plague. Themes of death, decay, and judgment filled paintings and manuscripts. The once celebratory tone of medieval Europe's art darkened, reflecting a society forever marked by loss. The bubonic plague reshaped culture as much as it reshaped life. Modern science later revealed the cause. Yersinia pestis, a bacterium spread by fleas on rats. What medieval Europe could not know, we now understand. The Black Death history stands as a reminder of humanity's vulnerability and the need for knowledge to face invisible threats. The Black Death was Europe's deadliest plague, a catastrophe that claimed millions yet reshaped history. From the ashes of despair rose new societies, economies, and ideas. Medieval Europe was never the same. The bubonic plague had destroyed, But it had also transformed, reminding humanity that even in darkness, change and survival endure.